Great that you are here, and so good for us to be here as well. My name is Moniek Buijzen. I'm a professor of communication and behavioral change at Erasmus University, and I'm presenting this session together with Thabo from Woudenberg, who is postdoc, social network interventions, and also the research manager of our projects. And today we're going to talk about our projects, and actually we're going to take you on a journey with us, because we are in a transition phase between two projects, and we're moving from data analytics to the use of AI in social network interventions. And our projects are about young people and young people's healthy lifestyle. And our aim is to investigate how we can improve those, improve communication campaigns aimed at young people to improve their healthy lifestyle. And we thought, you know, we've been talking about data all day and AI, and it's getting rather abstract. And we as behavioral researchers, we do not want to forget that we are talking about humans, actually, humans that are donating their data, and actually also humans that are getting those data. So we thought it would be nice, also as a change to those talking heads, to show you a little video about how we actually collected our data and with what purpose.
During childhood, important habits and behaviors are formed that persist into adulthood. Youth are especially susceptible to environmental influences, and their peers have substantial influence on, for example, what they eat, drink, and how active they are. The My Moves project aims to improve youth's lifestyle by investigating and targeting their eating and drinking behavior, physical activity, and media use in an intervention. The intervention uses a social network approach by identifying the most influential children in their networks and motivating them to spread the targeted health behavior within their peer group. When social influence agents spread the behavior successfully, it is incorporated in their social networks as a new group norm, leading to long-term behavior change. This approach goes beyond traditional mass media health campaigns that ignore the social context. Today's communication technologies, such as social media and smartphones, offer excellent possibilities to use the power of social networks in health campaigns. During this project, the Wearable Lab is developed, existing of an innovative smartphone-based research app connected to an activity tracker. The project's findings are presented to school children and parents, and at scientific conferences by the My Moves team.
So getting back to the more technical project overview, you have an idea now of what we did to collect the data, and almost 1,000 kids participated in this project. And we went back to them 8 times and collected these data. And in the first phase of the project, we collected in all kinds of ways their physical behaviors, their eating behaviors, but also we measure their network. So who are their friends, and who did they look up to, who did they spend time with. And in the second phase of the project, we use those data to apply a social network intervention. So the reason, a very important part of our project were those social networks, because we assume that the social influences amongst children are really important when it comes to their healthy lifestyles. And social networks are much more complex, so these social influences, than interpersonal influences. It's the entire network that plays a role. And the basic assumption of social network interventions is that some individuals in a social network are more influential than others. And the key to an effective social network campaign or intervention is actually to identify those influential individuals. We call them influence agents. The assumption in a social network intervention is that if we find those influential kids and target the interventions towards them, it will be more effective. So the million-dollar question here is, who are those influence agents? This is actually the holy grail of social network intervention research. And I'm not going to pretend we found this holy grail, but we learned a lot more about how to find those influence agents. And Thabo is now going to tell a bit more about what we discovered. Thabo.
Thank you, Moniek. Well, there are a different array of different ways how to determine who should be an influence agent in a social network intervention. The most basic one is just based on luck. We have a social network, for example, a classroom of children, and we just assign randomly some of the kids or some of the participants as an influence agent. But in the social network theory, there are better ways to determine who should be an important person in a social network. So the traditional way is to count the number of nominations. So those who get a lot of friendship nominations in a social network intervention, they will become the influence agent. But our idea was that maybe there are more strategic ways to select persons in a network if they have a specific strategic location. For example, if he's a bridge between two subgroups in a group, or those persons who have very short connections to all others in a network. So in a study, we wanted to test whether these selection criteria were actually better than selecting randomly a child in a classroom. And also, we can determine based on the data that we have on the relationships within a network, who should be the most influential. So in a second study, we didn't look at the theoretical selection criteria, but make decisions based on data and simulations. So in the first study, we made a simulation model of all the relationships that the children in the MyMove sample had with each other, but also their behavior and their socioeconomic status. And with the behavior in this study, we looked at physical activity. So how many steps the participants took each day. And with this data, we created a model that would simulate how the behavior would spread among the class. And after 1 year of simulation, we can see that those who are selected based on their in-degree centrality, so that is the number of nominations that a person gets, is the most effective one to select as an influence agent. And in the second study, we also looked at the optimization of the influence agent selection. So we took in the optimization algorithm each time one participant and simulated what the effect would be of increasing his or her physical activity on the overall physical activity of the classroom. So we could determine who should be the most influential person in the social network. And in this study, we saw that indeed this is more effective than those more traditional or more strategic theoretical ways of selecting influence agents. But also in these studies, we saw big differences between classes. For example, in the first study, we looked at 26 different classrooms, and we also looked at characteristics of the classrooms, of the networks. And as you can imagine, all the classes, all the social relationships are always different. And what we saw is in this study that depending on how the network was created, or so how the relationships were in the class, this had an effect on the effectiveness of our theoretical interventions or on our simulations. For example, what we call in-degree centralization. That means how dependent the social network is on one or several persons. So on the top social network, you can see one person, the bright red dot, who is really influential because he or she gets relatively the most nominations. Well, on the bottom network, there are more red dots, so it's harder to detect who is more influential or not. So based on this result, our idea is that we should tailor these interventions more towards the classroom, or go even one step further and tailor the intervention towards specific individuals. But we need your help for this. So we want to ask you to think about ways and how we can use artificial intelligence or the communication technology that we, for example, used in the MyMoves project of the smartphones in a smart platform to increase the effectiveness of social networking campaigns. So we would like to invite you to state your IDs in the comment box on the right hand bottom. But you can also state your question there and we can direct your questions after your suggestions. So please feel free to share your ideas or your dreams or suggestions. These can be very wide ideas or vague ideas or any idea at all, and we will try to discuss these. But first, I want to run an idea by you. So one of the ideas that I had, or we had as a project, is, as I already mentioned, to make it more personally, or to tailor the intervention to specific persons, or different interventions depending on the personality. So what we need is a lot of data, of course. For example, data on the personality traits or on the behavior. Is he or she an active person? How is the eating behavior? But also one very important point is the social environment. So is it a healthy social environment with a lot of physically active and a lot of water drinking peers or not? And maybe there are other factors or other variables that might be interesting to look at. And based on all this data, I want to make a sort of simulation model per participant or per child or per adolescent to determine what should be an effective intervention for this person. So now I would like to open up the floor for your ideas.
Thank you for the presentation. So the first idea that we have from one of these audience members is how can we use social media, like messaging apps, for example, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, or any sort of the content of these apps to kind of tailor these interventions for these situations?
Well, that's a very nice suggestion, actually. What we in the past couple of months did with a smaller project was to look at the content of the messages that the participants in the MyMoves app sent to each other. And based on the content, we wanted to see whether those who we think are influential, so they get a lot of likes on their messages, or they have a lot of friends talking to them, if they are also more positively on the social platform, and if they are also talking about more about the project or about health related issues. So we explored that idea a little bit, but we could extend it way more. But the results of that study is that there's not a big difference between those that we think are influential and those who we think are less influential. And mostly that is because most of the messages that the children sent to each other were rather neutral and valence, so they were not really positive or negative. And on the other hand, only a small portion of all the messages that they sent to each other are related to the project or are related to health-related behaviors, such as playing soccer or eating healthy snacks or stuff like that. most of the communications that they have to each other are about other topics.
And if I can add to that, I think those apps can also be really helpful in actually detecting the networks themselves, because we have found that the people who are communicating with each other, regardless of the content, actually reveals who's talking to whom. And we have found that that can enrich the traditional way of detecting networks a great deal. So that is a great suggestion, and we are dreaming along on how to apply that for interventions.
Right, thank you very much. Another question we have is on the ethics of this. So some people are wondering like whether it is really ethical for researchers, even if it's for the better, to actually look at the messages, for example, or other social networks and create this AI.
Well, that is an extremely important question. I totally agree. And we on purpose did not put it on the slide because we were sure it would come up. And I think behaving, or that's what we call a responsible health campaign, is also taking into account the autonomy and also the privacy, psychological privacy and informational privacy of young people. And it's something we really have to take into account in research as well as intervention practice. And our thoughts on this is actually, well, it will be a very important part of our project, actually incorporates this factor. And our thoughts on this is that it's very important that the individuals in these cases, we are talking about kids, but the same goes for adults, of course, is that people maintain agency about donating their data. So we keep it all transparent and voluntary. And of course, that's always important. But that also poses a challenge for us. It's almost a conflict of interest, because on the one hand, we want people, we want it, but also the law wants its people to have a free choice in if or not, whether or not they're going to donate their data. But on the other hand, we really want them to participate for the, as you asked, for the greater goods. So that's actually one of the research questions we are going to focus on in the next few years, because these ethical dilemmas is something that in the new world we really have to incorporate and always be aware of, and also have to figure out how are we going to deal with these ethical issues, and at the same time benefit of the potential of these new technologies.
That's very interesting. And building on that, the same person asked again, so would it be, in your opinion, fair to sacrifice some ethics just for the better, for example, betterment of children's health, and just for the greater good? If we can achieve that with AI, would it be okay for the government to take this data by themselves?
I would be very cautious in saying yes here. No, I don't think the goal justifies the means. So we should be as careful whether it's for changing this kind of behavior, other kinds of behaviors, or when it's marketing. We should always be aware of the autonomy and privacy of individuals that we are targeting towards. Otherwise, it would be a bit creepy. And we, as I said, this really poses conflicts. So you can also compare it to what's going on with the apps to detect the COVID-19 epidemic, or to detect, on the one hand, we want people to actually have a free choice in whether they want to participate or not. On the other hand, we want at least 60 to 80% of the people to participate. And this is a dilemma we cannot solve here, but we have to deal with in these times.
Yeah. Okay, so another question we have is what is the ultimate goal of this AI? Would it replace like the parents or the teachers as kind of like a mentor for the children, or is it just a tool for the parents and teachers to kind of help the children?
Thabo, do you have ideas on that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that it will ever be able to replace a role that a teacher or a parent has, or, as we also like to acknowledge in the project, peers have on each other. But I think it is, or could be, a way in how we could help those influences that peers or parents or teachers have on attaining a healthy lifestyle, or getting a healthy lifestyle. Especially for those who need it the most. So I think it can be well, not a submission, or how do you say you can change it, but I think you can help by help healthy lifestyles by using AI.
All right, that's a very interesting answer. So the next question is, since these children are using a lot of wearable devices and also smartphones, which are usually on them, are such personal health indicators given by these wearable devices also included in designing these interventions?
So for the project that we used, we had a wearable device. We had a wrist-worn accelerometer, so it measures the amount of steps per day. But yeah, for future, it could be very interesting to look at the device that the kids or maybe adults have themselves and use it sort of as an input, the data for an intervention.
Right. We have a suggestion as well for these tailored interventions. So somebody suggests that we could use the text data of online reviews as a to judge these interventions. And what is your opinion on that?
That is a great suggestion. That would actually expand the idea of just looking at the likes, but actually also the content of the responses. I think we could include that in our models, couldn't we, Thabo?
Yes, I think that's very doable. Yeah.
And I also think because thanks to AI developments, we can also, there are many possibilities of automated text analysis. So I can imagine that could be included in the algorithms. I don't know if that's, well, that's what we are dreaming about. So yeah, maybe in a few years, our devices will be fast enough to transfer that immediately to tailor these interventions. We also found that it's extremely important to find autonomy supportive ways of creating messages. So actually have messages that really fit to the target group. And I guess that using these responses and text can perhaps help in doing so. Thanks for the suggestion, we'll note it.
Yeah, another question we have is, what do you think are the larger like societal implications, psychological implications of this for the children themselves, and how they see the adults around them, especially their parents?
I'm not sure whether, well, it will have implications, of course. Again, something we should be really careful with and be aware of. I'm not sure if it will matter how they see their parents, but one thing that we are always aware of, and also, we think this is one of the risks and challenges we have to deal with, is that how peers see one another. We found in our studies, which we did offline in a classroom, you know, we select those influence agents and we train them to influence their peers, all voluntary, but still for a certain stage, this was not known to the other kids for a certain period of time. And of course, at the end of the experiments, we told everybody what had been going on, and there were no objections to it. Everybody liked it, but still, it may be a weird idea to know that there may be people around you that actually are influencing you because someone else asked them to. And quite frankly, this has been going on in marketing for quite some time. But still, that doesn't mean, like, referring back to the discussion we just had about the goals and the means, it doesn't mean it justifies it. So we are also trying to find ways to do this in an ethical way, and actually also make the receivers, so the non-influence agents, aware of what's going on and be transparent to them as well, without creating resistance, so that there won't be any problems within a network. I also have to say, we often tested how the relationships were between kids before and after interventions, and because we were afraid that it might affect the status of the influence agents, but we never found this. So it never harmed them, so to say.
Yeah, so the next question is actually a follow-up on the question that I just asked. So the person is asking, do you think that your intervention would create a dependency in these children for guidance and hinder their own ability to make lifestyle choices for themselves?
Thabo, you were going to say something?
Yeah, so one of the ideas is that we are really autonomy supportive in these projects that we are doing. So we're not hindering to make their own choices, we sort of empowering to make their own choices. I think Moniek has more detailed answer for this.
Well, empowerment was exactly the word I was going to use. That is at the core of everything we do. Also, our other projects on media and young people, is that we acknowledge that to some extent kids should be protected, but on the other hand, the best way to protect them is to empower them to deal with the media environment and actually their entire environment. So also our interventions are designed in such a way that kids choose their own strategies, how they can improve their own lifestyle, and develop their own messages and ways they want to help each other in having a healthy lifestyle. So we are not concerned that they will be dependent on others to do so. Actually, we are helping them to do it themselves.
Thank you for the answer. The next question is asking for some examples for these tailored interventions and how exactly this whole process kind of works.
Okay, so one of the interventions we did last year, or already 2 years ago, we asked the influence agents to create short vlogs about physical activity, so sports and physical activity they did after school. And what we did is we asked those influence agents to come up with their own ideas of what they are doing after school or the sport clubs that they are visiting, and shooting the content on a smartphone. And then the smartphone or the videos were edited by a video editor to make him really nice vlogs. These were shown to the rest of the class. This is a sort of, the whole class gets the same intervention idea, right? So one of, or maybe some of the participants are already physically active, and well, they don't need that type of influence there. But maybe they are better off by, well, seeing other vlogs about healthy eating or drinking water. So one of those ideas could be that you sort of tailor the vlogs that they are exposed to, dependent on the types of behavior that they are showing. So that will be one of my ideas to test in the future.
Right. The final question is just asking for the program that was used to make the data, the graphs.
The graphs are all done in R.
Well, some advertising at the end then. So I guess we have to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for being here and asking so many interesting questions and also some really helpful suggestions. We really enjoyed doing this. And I wish you a very happy or nice end of the summit. And after this, you can join the keynote session by Payal Arora. Enjoy.